because at 6:30 I presented a very formal version of the 2015-2016 proposed Board of Education budget. And so what I thought I would do is, and there are handouts that are floating around. Squeeze in and want to look on with somebody, you can do that. There's one that is the PowerPoint presentation, which will be posted on the website tomorrow or Monday, along with a video of the presentation as well. But there were 3 handouts tonight. One is the actual PowerPoint presentation for the proposed budget. The second handout is, although in very fine print, the actual number breakdown by each of the 9 cost centers, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then there's an additional handout that provides some background information, our district mission, our foundation skills and competencies, our district goals, our building level goals, and cost center goals. So that's what we have out and about this evening. So where I guess I'll start in a similar fashion that I did with the board, is that the Board of Education budget is comprised of 3 elements. It's the operation budget, which is the bulk of what we do on an annual basis. It includes all the costs for personnel, all the costs for transportation, all the costs for special education, all the instructional and resource materials, any outside contracting, nursing services, technology, all of those kinds of things are in the operation budget. In addition to that, we also have a capital budget that is actually it's separate, but ultimately at referendum time you'll see the operation budget as one total, the capital budget as one total, and the debt service as one total. All combined, when the referendum comes about, it will be a total budget for the Board of Education. So the capital budget represents all of the kinds of things that have technically a greater than 20-year lifespan and have a cost of greater than $7,500 and have that are material. It can't be for people, it can't be for services, it has to be for things. And then the debt service budget is all towns and all boards of ed have some level of debt service. They've taken out loans to either do a building project or to do a repair project that is larger than what can be done in a regular operations budget. And so things like the addition to the Joel School, the annex years ago, we just recently did a window project at Elliott, and we have, of course, the new high school project that is currently underway. All of those have loan amounts that need to be paid back, and those are included in the debt service as a combination of the principal, the actual amount of money that's owed, and then interest on that money. So those are the 3 categories of the budget: operations, capital, and debt service. My major focus for this evening is to talk about the operations budget and what that ultimately will entail. But just so that there's a sense of the overall concept, is that the operation budget for the proposed operation budget for 2015-16 is $31 million. The capital budget is just under $500,000, and the debt service is just under $900,000. So that combined together represent $33 million is what will be, right at this point going forward, is what the total Board of Education budget will be. Again, I'm going to focus in on the operation budget, and really for me, this is about trying to look at how do we best provide services for our students. And the way we go about doing that is we look at what we call our driving forces and unifying principles, which you will see in the mission statement in this packet, in the mission statement of the school district. So they're really broken down into 4 areas. One is focusing on literacy in all disciplines. One is focused on the application of knowledge, the things that we are teaching our kids. The third area is providing professional development and training for our teachers on an ongoing basis to make sure that they are as high quality, high performing as we would want for our kids. And then ultimately providing a safe school environment for all of our students. So those are the four lenses, if you will, that I use, or that we use as a district, as district administrators when we build our budgets. The second piece of building the budget on the front end is the fact that we start essentially from scratch every year with the idea that we identify the needs that we have for our students and to maintain the programs that exist. So for example, we have, and we've had for a long time, K through 12, all-day kindergarten program. That was a program that was in place before I got here. And so part of the budget makes sure that we can continue to support an all-day kindergarten program as part of our early childhood support. The second piece is something that we have been able to ultimately build on and actually see to fruition, the idea of a K through 12 world language program. As many of you know, we start our world language Spanish in kindergarten, and it carries all the way through the high school. This past year, we have been able to focus in on actually having students at the middle school complete what is essentially Spanish 2, level 2 in Spanish, so they can enter high school starting in Spanish 3. We also do offer a French program at the high school and at the middle school and high school, and we offer a Chinese program at the high school. Those are all supported by our operation budget, both in terms of resources and materials, but also for the staffing to go along with it. One of the things that is less sexy, if you will, or less of a spotlight, is the fact that we have to transport kids to and from school. So there's a big portion of our budget that is focused on buses. Unfortunately, too many buses are empty, and we're seeing more and more people bring their kids to and from school, but we have a state requirement to provide transportation for all public school students. That's a chunk of money in our budget. The other part that isn't really lots of fun to talk about in terms of books and supplies and activities and materials are the fact that we need to maintain our buildings, and that we have to have a staff available to do that. Of our $33 million, or $31 million operation budget, that's a little over $2 million to operate our 4 schools, 400,000 square feet of facilities. And start to equate that with homes that are anywhere from 1,100 square feet to 4,000 square feet. You start to get a perspective of how big the facilities are. And my maintenance director likes to talk about how many toilets we have in the district, how many lights we have in the district, how many faucets, and all of the things that we take for granted every single day. And most of us take for granted in our homes until the plumbing doesn't work, or until the heat doesn't work, or until the power goes out. We just take those things for granted. Those aren't things we want to think about, or we don't like to think about necessarily. The next piece that is really a critical element of our program is the support we provide for all of our identified special needs students. So these are kids who, through a federal mandate, have met criteria that have specialized learning needs in one fashion or another. It might be because of the way they process information. It may be the way that they may have some difficulty with their ability to behave themselves. There was another term that I wanted to use that was nicer, but the ability to behave in a way that they can actually access their learning in school. And then we have some kids who are very, very severely cognitively and or physically handicapped, disabled, and it makes it harder for them to access education. And so we're required to provide services for all of those students. One of the things that we're really proud of in that area is that we have worked very diligently to make sure that kids who in some cases might otherwise have to be in a separate program, not in the community, that we have worked on building programs within our community to support those kids in school. So we have an autistic program here, or actually throughout the district, but that emanates from the Joel School. We have a life skills types program for kids who are likely not to head off to college, but need to have work-related skills and executive functioning skills, as well as their academic skills. And then we, over the course of the last couple of years, we've been able to add a behavior specialist that has helped us really work with kids who are struggling with control issues within the school setting to be able to help them manage their education better. And then ultimately, we have a responsibility for identified special ed students until they turn 21, 22, depending on when their birthday is and where the year falls. And so there's a program that we are working on, or work with Madison and Guilford, that's housed here in town over by the True Value Ace Hardware complex, called Strive, and it's a secondary transition program, and it's for kids who have essentially graduated, technically not graduated, but that are between 18 and 21 that have to have a transition program based on their particular needs. So those are those components, and then the bulk of the operation budget is really on people. We have just under, this year we're at about 1,900 students, and in order to educate those students, we need staff. We need teachers. We need highly qualified teachers to work with our curriculum and to help us actually implement the curriculum that, as a district, that we have developed. And so the day-to-day instruction carried out by teachers is the vast majority of our budget, our operations budget, in the tune of about 60% of the overall budget is staff and personnel for educating everybody who walks through the door.
Teachers, do you have the rest?
Just shy of 200.
Yeah.
97.
Under what?
98, 97.
Does that include the paras?
No,
Just
just
teachers.
certified
Thank you.
teachers. Okay, no, you're fine. It's hard to break my concentration at this point in the day. So the other thing that we have that is included as part of our operation budget, that again that I spoke of during the presentation, that we've spent a fair amount of time over the last 2 or 3 years focusing on is what we're calling advanced academic experiences. And at the high school, it's kind of easy for us to identify those in terms of the AP courses, the advanced placement courses, the early college experience courses through UConn, and I always forget the tech ones, college career courses, all aimed at providing kids with opportunities to earn credit for college while they are still in high school, whether it be a community college or one of the state colleges or any college that they might go to. But in addition to that, we have experiences like our musical at the high school, our musical at Pearson. We have after-school enrichment programs, we have during the day enrichment programs. But the enrichment programs are designed for all kids, not just quote-unquote talented and gifted or gifted and talented kids. While they're open and accessible to all of those kids, it really is, we have made an effort to make sure that all programs that we offer are open to and engage all students who have an interest and or passion in those particular topics. So we have some STEM-related activities at the middle school. We have some robotics activities at the high school. At Pearson, we have invention convention, geography, spelling bee, math. It's not Math Olympics. It's Math League. Continental Math League, which carries on through, and then we have programs that PTA is sponsoring. Also to extend those kinds of thinking, and so we're support. We like to embrace and support these kinds of activities for all kids, even though that's not quite right. Okay.
Do you want to focus on what the big differences are this year for focuses, things that you've had to tackle this year that you've never had to tackle before?
Sure. So the two main priorities for us going into the 15-16 budget really revolve, one around our English language learner population, and the other is around our early childhood or preschool population. We start with the ELL population first. Over the course of the last 5 years, that population has doubled in our district, and which is significant. When I first got here, we had 2 ELL teachers, and the numbers were such that I would have, had I had my druthers, I probably would have reduced an ELL teacher at that point, because it didn't make any sense to me why we had the resources that we did. Over the course of the next couple of years, the numbers were starting to increase, but not as dramatically as over the last 2 years, where literally in the last 2 years they've gone from 30-ish to over 70. And the interesting part is that the two areas where the population has grown the most is at our elementary level and at the high school level. And the issue for us is that at the elementary level, we have a very solid immersion program for our kids coming into preschool and kindergarten. We can provide a very rich language experience that, for the most part, is making a difference. By the time kids are in 3rd grade, sometimes it takes until 4th grade, but they have moved out of the labeled ELL criteria and really require very little support beyond just normal instruction. So that portion of the program was working really well, even for kids who were coming to our schools as kindergarten and 1st graders without any English language. We were doing a really good job, but the numbers blew up, and so it required some rethinking around how we were going to support that immersion program with our tutor and our teacher, and it kind of pulled that person back and had less opportunity, less time with the kids who were at Pearson. On the other end of the spectrum, what we were finding is that we had a growth in the number of kids coming to us at the high school level, and again, not speaking any English. And we didn't have a good mechanism in place for those kids coming, and we had program, but when the numbers grew to the point where we weren't able to get to all of them or really identify how best to support them, what ended up happening is that in too many cases, some of these kids were out in regular classes, and they weren't getting the instruction, they weren't improving in their English. So we've redesigned that program this year. We started taking a look at it last year in terms of really trying to assess what the need was. This year we've made some adjustment in the amount of tutoring that we're doing at the lower level. to help the
Are
numbers
the
there.
students pulled out of the class, or does the aid go, does the aid?
At the elementary level, most of it is in class, but there is, at the kindergarten, there is some small group and if you will, pull out instruction, support through the tutor. But a lot of it is support in the classroom. And again, the elementary piece, with the additional hours and, and really pulling our ELL teacher with a focus to the elementary, to the K-3 population, we know we're in good shape. But it
What
leaves.
about the middle? So I ran into a teacher the other day who, in our middle school level, who had no idea who I was, and totally voluntarily, in a group of people, volunteered that she has 3 students who do not speak English in her class, and she, honest to God, doesn't know how to relate to them.
Right. So, we are addressing that. The reality is that the population at Pearson and Elliott is less needy than in terms of language acquisition. So while they may not be speaking English in her classroom, it's not as a result of them not being able to speak or understand English. And so one of the things that we're having to do is look at that middle population, 4 through 8, in terms of how best to support those kids who are capable, but not, they're not necessarily out of the woods yet.
Is there an assessment?
Yes, it's a tool called the Lost Links that we use on an annual basis to assess their language, their spoken language, their written language, and their receptive language.
Jack, I don't mean to interrupt, but haven't you also reached out to learn the
Yes, that's
with
true.
regards to programming and
Yeah.
what's out there for ELL
Yes.
supports?
I met earlier this year with coordinator of the English language learning program through Learn to get some ideas or to lay out what we are planning on doing. And ultimately, we've also reached out to a couple other districts who are not quite in the same situation as we are, but especially if we come up with a good program at the high school, would like to maybe send 1 or 2 of their kids for our, we do some kind of collaborative. The main focus for us is really at the high school, because what we were seeing is that we had a population of 7 or 8 kids that there was no way that sending them off to a regular core class made any sense. They were sitting there and some of them, were just sitting there and just, okay.
And is it all different languages?
Well, mostly Spanish, but we have, what did we say, 12 different, we got 12, I think 9 different languages, 14 different countries that were represented. But that's actually, 9 different languages isn't bad compared to some places. So, that's, our predominant language is Spanish. In any case, the goal at this point is we have, and I refer to it as boot camp, everybody else wants to call it something else, language immersion program, something that has it's fancier and glossier. But essentially what we've identified is that these kids need a concentrate, before they worry about credits, before they worry about anything else, they need to have the rudiments of English so that they can survive. And survive in the community, but also then start to be able to access the education that we offer. And in most cases, it's not an ability level, it's not an intellect level, it's a language access level. We do have some kids who do struggle with other areas, but we can't even, in some cases, we can't parse that out until we know what their language skills can be. And we have had experience with kids who are coming to us at all different levels without a base language, without either Spanish or any language, Chinese, Japanese, whatever. And so that presents different kinds of problems for us. And so part of what we did in our study last year was really try to parse out what are our actual needs.
So do you have to add things to this budget?
So
to
what's
address-
added in this budget is a full-time English language learner teacher that will ultimately work between Pearson and Elliott to support that population, support teachers in how best to work with kids in their classrooms, but also to provide some support for the access for the kids. with that, that will reduce the caseload for our high school ELL teachers, so it'll take what was a half-time person and make her a full-time at the high school. And the half-time, the part-time role that our elementary, our K through 5 elementary person was doing will be full-time at the elementary. So we'll have a full-time at Joel, a full-time split between Pearson and Pearson and Elliott, and a full-time person at the high school. And then the program, we're also reallocating some of the reading folks at the high school as well to help support that program. So that's a you know, somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000 in the budget that is focused on that. The second area that is, any other questions about ELL or
What,
that
I
program?
just, what percentage of, I might have missed it, of the total population of our students is this ELL?
It's 71 students.
Yeah, 71 out of 1,900 or 1,850. It's a relatively small percentage.
And
But
so
it's-
how many positions, like how many, because the way you were explaining, I'm just misunderstanding, how
3
many
positions.
teacher positions?
3 teacher positions total for the 71.
But it's
We're
just
adding 1.
Adding one.
We have 2, we're adding 1.
Adding a completely new hire or adding half-time to
A
full-time?
completely new hire.
No, we have 2 full-time teachers currently
Okay, that's
that
what
are
we were,
split.
that's what we were confused on then.
Okay, that are split between, one is split between Joel and Pearson, but it's a full-time position. And one is split
That's
between
where the
Elliott and
half-time
Morgan,
is gonna be.
also a full-time position. So the Elliott-Morgan split is gonna be full-time at Morgan. The Joel Pearson person is gonna be full-time at Joel, and we're gonna replace their halves at Joel, or at Pearson and Elliott with a full-time person.
Makes sense.
Again, it won't be an even split in terms of caseloads, but it will significantly bring those caseloads down. And at this point, 71 for 2 people was too much, wasn't working. And,
Especially with some of the, I think
right,
the significant needs we have at Lowell, with we have students entering who have no language, which is, so blows my mind. And then at the high school where we had just 23 students in October,
yeah,
so that was
significant.
23 students.
certainly unexpected, but not something.
Yeah, that one wasn't what we were planning. Okay, so other questions with regard to ELL? Okay. So the other area that we're focused on is our early childhood population. And in the course of discussion with the board, one of the pieces, and it kind of dovetails together, we have, over the course of the same 5-year period, we've seen the percentage or the numbers of families that are eligible for free and reduced lunch grow from just under 300 to almost 500. So we've seen not quite a doubling, but almost a doubling of that population as well. Now, all kinds of factors, and I don't have all the, the facts and figures as to, why that is. Were there people who, in the course of the last 3 or 4 years, finally said, I need to apply for this, and, were eligible before? Perhaps, but we've seen a growing number. Well, but the corollary to that, and we talked about some of the things we're doing in terms of providing, we've applied for, and we are now providing breakfast programs at all 4 schools. It brings in an additional resource for the cafeteria program at each of the 4 schools on an annual basis to the tune of about $3,000 each school, plus the additional reimbursements. It still doesn't cover all of our costs for programming for breakfast and lunch, but we're working to try to offset the deficit, if you will, in the cafeteria program, which technically isn't part of our Board of Ed budget. And that's another whole story, but we won't really talk about that more at this point, because it's just too convoluted. anyway, we are making efforts to try to address the need of those students just from a from a standpoint of nutrition, because we know kids need to.
And that's, it's 25% of our population qualifies for free.
25%.
1 out of every 4 kids that comes to school. Not the new number, but that's, I think, 25. I calculated it. It was
But
20,
that's
it
what-
used to be 20%,
And is your
it's
point that's-
25% right now.
More indicative of other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the corollary piece of that we've noticed that during the same time is a combination of the number of kids that are coming to our kindergartens without any kind of preschool or prior or any kind of organized preschool daycare experiences, and certainly high-quality preschool daycare experiences. And so one of the things that we're concerned about, and again, partially through the Best Beginnings program, is we've identified kids who are on waiting lists for the Head Start program in town, and other students who are not having access, partially because of finances, to any kind of daycare or preschool program. So we've connected with the Head Start program, Partners in Schools, or School Partners program, and if it is granted, if they earn the grant, then we will have a Head Start program here at Joel for up to 15 students that, again, will not have a cost to the district other than providing space for the program. In addition, the state's initiative to address early childhood issues, there's a fairly sizable grant awards for preschool programs, for districts to apply for their own preschool programs. It's called the Smart Start Grant Program, and it offers districts $75,000 to run a preschool program in their schools. There's an additional up to $75,000 in the first year for any startup costs or equipment or programming requirements that you might need.
You got that?
We haven't heard yet,
Oh.
but we've applied for that. We applied for the 75 for the program, plus I think it's 63 and change for the startup money. We didn't have a need for the 75.
And how many students will that cover?
That would also provide support for another 15 kids, 15 to 18 kids.
Would that be like, because like we have our own preschool program, the Head Start would be a separate classroom.
So right now, and so that backs into the other issue. So currently the district, for special ed purposes, runs a reverse mainstream or typical peer special ed preschool program. And the idea behind that is that for every identified special ed identified preschooler, you match with a typical peer and you run a program that is the reverse mainstream, a typical peer program to provide support for the special ed student, but it's an overall experience for all kids.
That's good.
So, well, it's been great, but our actual identified special ed numbers have now dropped to the point where we can't support we've had 4 sections of the special ed preschool program. It was 2 when I got here, we grew it to 3 and then 4, and
So
now the
4
numbers are
for
down.
15 or 4 for
It's not quite 15 each, because it's a little bit less than that, because it is based in part on the number of special ed kids and then the number of matching kids, and I can't tell you off the top of my head how many that impacted. But in the 14-15 or the 15-16 budget, we're actually, because our numbers are down, we're actually having to reduce 1 full preschool program, or actually 2 sections. So we're actually eliminating 1 of the special ed programs because we don't have the numbers to support it. So that drew us or drove us toward the Smart Start program and the Head Start program, because we know there's a need. And so what we're hoping to be able to do is we'll have our regular special ed program, which our special ed students plus typical peers will be one group of kids that we'll be supporting, up to, again, roughly 15 or 20 kids that would be in that program, depending on needs and typical peers. The Smart Start program, again, 15 to 18 kids, and then the Head Start program, which would be 15 kids. So it doesn't get everybody, but it's certainly a broader capture than we would have, or than we currently have.
And we talked about us fee-based.
Right, all three of the programs have some fee associated with it. We've targeted for the Smart Start grant program, the sliding scale number, kind of what would the bottom line would be is that in a,
40.
well, the total, if for all the kids that would be paying some kind of fee, or families who are paying some kind of fee, it would generate about $40,000 for all three for the three programs. The Head Start is separate; that's all self-funding. But for the special ed program, the typical peers and the Smart Start program would generate about $40,000 for tuition.
Jack, quick question then about the possible layoff, and would that Smart Start save a position?
Right. Good question. Good question coming from the association. The intent at this point is that if in fact we earn that grant, the preschool teacher would and is very much eager to be able to take on that program. So that would save that position, which leads me into the other part that is an enrollment-based issue. One of the big issues for us going forward in the budgets for the next several years is a projected declining enrollment, and it becomes fairly significant if the projections prove to be accurate. We're looking at about 50 kids between this year and next year decline right now, and that's the projection. So what we've done is over the course of the last couple of years, we've seen that decline. Harder the last couple of years to parse out, here's a number, 20 kids, and so that means one teacher. And we haven't really been able to do that, although last year, actually, as it turned out, at the end of the year, our kindergarten numbers were such that we had a resignation, and we were actually able to absorb that without hiring a new person, and we moved one person from kindergarten into a first grade position.
That's to accommodate that bubble.
No, the bubble's already at
Okay.
so right now, the real drop in population, is really here at Joel. And so we're actually reducing an additional two elementary positions. Right now, it looks like a first grade and a third grade that would be ultimately impacted, but it may not be a first grade and a third grade teacher. It depends on a variety of other factors.
Quick question about the population, is that something that's seen across the board? Is that happening in all towns?
All
in
across the
Connecticut?
state,
Okay.
they're all across the state.
Is it enrollment?
Yeah, enrollment going down.
Well, that's why preschools are closer too, because they just don't have the preschool population.
We need a few more.
It doesn't like come and go, like I was thinking, like if we do get this, like, if they build a high school, you know what I'm saying, like some people will be
If
attracted
you
to
build it,
that.
they will come. That's what I keep
And
saying.
also, when you have this amazing like English language learner thing, they'll say, well, come meet, they have this great program, more will come. I mean, I think that,
We can hope so. I mean, truly, we hope so on multiple accounts. We think we are a little gemstone in the rough at this point here in Clinton. People are, I think there are folks that are starting to get a concept of how much we have done in the last 5 or 6 years to provide high quality instruction for our kids. It is still a work in progress, but we are doing some pretty fabulous things for our community, despite some angst at budget time. Yeah, sorry. You can erase that one. In any case, I think we really are, and as a community, several years ago when we were able to get through a lot of arm twisting and phone calls and hard work on many groups' parts, getting out enough voters to pass the high school referendum, that is going to be a huge boon for this community and way bigger than people realize, because it also opens the door for the current high school property to be turned into a tax earning or tax providing concern for the community, and significant concern, right? Because significant taxes. So you combine, increased tax base with a state-of-the-art high school, with state-of-the-art programming, and then you start to look at some of our, what we have been building on our advanced academic experiences, and some of the program design work that is in the development stage. We're really a great little spot, and we have certainly lots of housing that people can jump into at this point. I know that there's way more homes on the market than we'd like to think, but we're also starting to see some businesses come into town, and there are some things that are just the domino effect that I think we have the ability to really reshape the way folks think about Clinton and public schools and the community as a whole, and it's really exciting.
And the declining enrollment is definitely not a Clinton phenomenon. If you look at the numbers, it's worse in a lot of surrounding communities actually than it is here. I mean, Madison's numbers have declined harder and faster than ours have.
Absolutely.
East Lines have declined harder and faster than ours have. So Old Lines aren't. So a lot of communities are actually
In worse shape, in worse decline,
Yeah.
and
much more rapid decline.
and seeing much bigger increases in their budgets.
Yes.
Oh, again, did I say that?
What's a non-educational line item?
What's that?
What's a non-educational line item? That somebody asked about?
So I would argue that postage, for example, would be non-educational. I would argue that some of our maintenance line items could be construed to be non-educational. Office supplies, I mean, there's a fine line in some cases, because you could make a case for the fact that without elements in this budget, whether it be office supplies, whether it be postage, whether it be maintenance, whether it be
That was my thinking, I was like, what
that, how is it not educational?
Okay.
But I think the line, I mean, and some of it has to do with the way the particular law was stated. It has to do with how we deal with budgets in the front end for the town to be able to provide input, and for the board then to make some decisions, which we already do. And then the second instance is really how we deal with whatever terminology you want to use, whether it be surplus, whether it be result of operations, or whether it be good management, or whatever, that the monies that has been appropriated to the board, that the board has the responsibility and authority to expend that money in the best way it deems necessary to support the educational needs of the district. That's where that other fine line comes in terms of the non-educational components, in terms of if we realize savings, for example, in insurance, is that educational or non-educational? And should we, automatically have to turn, that we don't have the ability to reallocate that money in some fashion? So that's part of the
It's
discussion.
just the reallocation, the surplus they were about. Okay, got it.
But it's also about the bringing together of the town side and the Board of Education side to do some things together to consolidate, to save. I'm thinking like cutting the lawn. I mean, years ago you had guys from maintenance that cut the lawn, but now that's Park and Rec who does that. So is that an example,
That's
or-
less of the, I mean, there are folks that are trying to read into that's what that means, and I'm not the attorney that's gonna weigh in, but
I was just
I
wondering
would
if that was
disagree
one of
with
those
that.
things.
That's
I mean, it's
not
important to
really
have the grass cut, but is it?
No, and it's important that we have, I mean, we look at ways that we can consolidate and work together on things. I mean,
Right.
there was some talk about the town doing our snow plowing years ago, and they came to the realization that they couldn't do it for what it was costing us to have done, even with an outside contractor. So it didn't make sense to do that. And having, and then it's ultimately pulling resources from the town
Right.
to do what we need when they need, and you saw, you know, the last 2 days, and I would, you know, sing their praises, both our town crews and our Board of Ed crews did a fabulous job keeping things open, and then yesterday really, you know, getting things ready so we could open today without a delay, and it, you know, was probably pretty close yesterday, but there were some concerns about safety for kids in, you know, in different spots, so we erred on the side of safety. We went back to our driving forces.
Okay, speaking of the surpluses, though, you think that because the gas prices like dramatically decreased this year, I would think that only because people take a look at that and they said, oh, you were so far off last year, you always ask more money and you have so much left over, and like explaining.
So, first of all, the interesting thing is that from a heating oil standpoint, we have not been using heating oil, we've been using natural gas for the last 3 years. And we locked in our natural gas prices at a much lower rate than gas and oil was, or petroleum-based gas and oil, diesel fuel. And even with our new contract, we're still below the current market price for oil with our natural gas. And some of the savings we anticipated some savings, but it actually, the contracts in both for electricity and gas were actually better than we had expected in each of those years. So the issue for us is that we kept those flat funded. We didn't increase them over that same time period, and yet we still saw some reductions. And again, over a 3-year period, give or take about $60,000 in both gas and in electricity in terms of overall savings. And that's, over 3 years, that's not huge, but it's better than if it went up $60,000 over that same 3-year period.
And what about the gas for like the buses? Do they kind of like, is it you just pay the bus with the buses and it doesn't matter if the gas goes up or down?
The diesel, we actually ultimately end up paying through the town, because the town maintains the diesel tanks for the buses. And so we do an anticipated amount, but ultimately we pay the bill through the town. So we factor in an amount for fuel or for diesel for the buses in our transportation line items with that contract. We've been pretty much on the money with.
Okay. Shall I go over our questions?
Sure. Oh, yeah, wait, where?
I didn't have a card, so just.
Oh, no way! Actually, I was looking at this young lady, I was expecting a good question.
Sarah just put, it's very,
Random stuff.
yeah, it's very random.
Random stuff.
Okay. Well, you wanna start?
I think they're worthy questions, but maybe give them to your own.
Do you want me to give them to you?
Okay.
Mom,
You
does it
already have
people
my
pre-screen?
question.
Yeah.
Do the same thing in class.
Mom, you already have my
Answer-
question. Answer to like any of these.
All right, we'll start with the non-10-year-old questions. Are we hiring one more full-time person for professional technical services, professional/technical services? No. What is professional technical services?
There was an increase in there, so it just looked like maybe a full-time salary. It said it was plus 59,000.
That was the one. So yes.
Yeah.
And that was why I asked, at the Board of Ed meeting, I asked about that object,
Okay.
because you can't connect it to the line items to see
Okay.
where the increases are. So, and I had the same exact concern that that's how it was gonna play out, but it looks like it's a full-time position.
Okay, so what is that
Yeah,
increase?
what is it
then?
for? This is the question.
I think that's part of well, I'll let Jack answer it, but if you go back and read the description of the object,
Okay.
Mary Jo, it's that, it would be the page before,
Was it the one that was 321?
yes.
320. So just to do a quick summary, if you look at the 321 category, that is, there are services that are actually part of the special ed programs, services for handicapped, training and in-service, police services, student activities. So there are several areas under that total. But ultimately, the ones that show some increase on the overall are the fact that we have increased nursing services by about 4.5% for their contract. The sports officials, we have been under budgeted the last 2 years, largely because our kids have been doing so well, and we end up in the postseason, and so that's an additional charge. And so we had to come up with it. So that's where the bulk of that money is really located. Trying to think if there's anything else in that account. I think there's a little increase in police services, a little increase in student activities. But it's now, it's really more of a conglomerate, it doesn't have anything to do with the person.
Okay, it just seemed like, you know.
Yep.
Answer your question now.
No, absolutely,
That's the first question, come on, you're in your position.
yeah,
You're not.
no.
How many teachers have we cut / lost net over the last 5, or not replaced over the last 5 years?
Wait,
It's not my question.
I didn't ask that one either, but I'd like to know.
okay, so, between last year and going forward into next year, I mean, we reduced, just trying to-
Classrooms.
so four teachers over the last 2 years, but then we've also reallocated some of those positions. So we added a guidance counselor last year, we added a literacy specialist at the high school last year, and a math. Oh yeah, that's right, how could I forget? So we added an additional math coach. So essentially, you know, we're kind of at a wash at this point. But, you know, we've been able to translate a reduction in classroom teachers based on enrollment decline to resources that we've identified as critical needs for the remaining students.
And why are athletics up 12%?
Okay, good question. Overall, athletics are up in part due to the officials. Part of it has been an ongoing work on reconditioning equipment and making sure everything is certified appropriately, so that you have some equipment increase costs. We've expanded, we're trying to get to a point where we could have a full-time trainer for our athletic program, so we've increased numbers there for that. And we have some additional dollars in stipends for expanding programs. For example, the running program at the elementary or at the middle school, and additional coaches for soccer and lacrosse based on the participation rates.
During the cost center presentations, I was taken aback at the exponential growth of kids participating in high school athletics. And for me, from my standpoint, there's a direct correlation between participating in athletics and academic success in the classroom.
Yeah, we have more and more kids participating, means we need more
Support.
uniforms, more equipment,
Right.
more time from an athletic trainer, more coaches, more everything.
Does any of that money equate to the increase in the stipends that we talked about? I mean,
Well, contractually, there's also an
that
increase.
in that budget, that part of that?
In the
budget?
athletic budget, yes.
So that hadn't changed in years, and we talked about that, and increased that for all coaches.
Right, the last contract, we can do some increase.
Next question?
Oh, I think
How
there
about
was,
a 10-year-old question? I want a 10-year-old question.
Do it
You bring it up,
today.
yeah.
yeah, but this is like, actually, this is a funny one. So she wrote basically brainstorming questions. She wrote, why is it called a box of Joe? And the reason this is so funny is because when I worked at CCMC, a certain politician who doesn't represent our state any longer came to talk about how they were changing Medicaid formularies for reimbursing children's hospitals. And so it was a bunch of patients and their families, and someone had brought a box of Joe, and I'm not exaggerating that he went on for 45 minutes about why it was called Joe and a box of Joe. To a bunch of kids in a children's hospital.
So why is it called the box of Joe?
I don't even remember. I lasted about
That
5,
was
and
my
I moved,
question.
and I moved right on from that.
Coffee, in slang, is referred to as Joe, and
Joe.
it's in a box.
How do you spell it?
All right.
But he went on to why it was, the slang was Joe.
I have a book called Why Do We Say Those Things? I'll have to check it tomorrow.
Yeah.
More
Oh, I see.
technical
So-
questions.
So, wait a second,
Sarah.
do you have Google?
Yeah.
There you go. That's a great question for Google.
Yeah.
All right.
machine.
She did, and much of this doesn't have anything to do with our discussion tonight, but she did ask, why did her father want to become a policeman? So she's gonna have to have that question asked. that
Answer
question.
someplace else. I can't, that one I can't help you with.
So then the only other one that I was aware of was about the state funding. So do we still expect that? Because for a while we had heard that it was gonna be decreasing. to
Current
towns.
projections is, continues to be at that same 6 million and 6,000,005 number.
And
from
how
the
do they
state.
determine that? Is that our population, is that our? per
So
capita
the
income?
education cost sharing grant is a process that has, and pardon my French, but has been bastardized for probably 20 years, where every time they've tried to go to fix it, they've tweaked or added or subtracted or played with it in a way that somebody, as in all good politics, gets a little bit more or a little bit less based on whoever's at the table. It's such a convoluted, they've actually done, I think, 3 state studies now on the ECS grant formulary, and it is so convoluted that no one has figured out how to undo it, similar to our tax code. And so on some level, it's either start from scratch or leave it alone. I mean, because there isn't any other way, there isn't a way to fix it. There've been so many adjustments and tweaks that you can't back out of it a straight formula that says, based on socioeconomic, based on numbers, based on size, based on whatever, and here's the big pot, you get a certain percentage. It just doesn't work that way. And while, we're, on some level, I feel, compared to some communities that are similar to us, who get much less than we do, $6 million, $6.5 million is revenue to the town on an annual basis. I'm sorry? To offset educational costs. I mean, it is designed to be revenue source to the town to offset the ultimate tax for education. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's flat funded.
Okay.
I have a question. I know that the posting went for a new position at Pearson. At this point, they're just out of curiosity, so if there's a new position created, where does that come from in a budget, regardless of what it was? Yeah, so when anything comes up anywhere in the
Okay,
district.
yeah, I had to register
Yep.
what
Where,
it was for.
where does that come from in the budget at this point in the year?
So, one of the things that happens with our budget process is that we're now in January, but this budget is for the 15-16 is based on all of the personnel we currently have. And so so last year at this time, we were basing it on the personnel we had. We did ultimately end up with a couple of retirements and people changing, and we reduced, although we had factored in the reductions. So there is some balance in the personnel line item that allows us some flexibility during the course of the year, so that if a para is needed for a special ed student, or in this case, we are looking for a special ed teacher for a particular student to be able to manage their program. So that's where it would come from. And we've been the other, the worst case scenario is that, because the other kinds of things that can happen is that we can have a special ed student that comes into the district that requires, or that is actually, the family will reside here, but the student might be already in an out-of-district placement at the tune of $80,000 to $150,000 to $200,000, and at whatever point that they move into our district, they become our responsibility, and so we would have to be able to absorb that cost. Fortunately, knock on wood, I hate to say this too loudly, when that happens, ultimately in the course of the year, there is some movement in and some movement out, and we've been able to pretty much be able to balance that out within the special education budget. Worst case scenario is if we didn't have those funds, if we didn't have, some money in the personnel budget, or money, that we realize better savings than we had hoped for, then there is an option then to go back to the town for additional monies. Which again, one of the things that is a revenue to the town is that every year there's what they call excess cost grant. It's a reimbursement grant. It's actually a year in arrears, or a year behind, that is based on the total cost for our special ed students, student by student, and any student whose educational costs exceed 4.5 times the regular ed tuition cost, or the per pupil expenditure cost, then we get a reimbursement for that, the difference in that. Except it doesn't exactly work like that, because it's supposed to be 100% of the difference between 4.5 times the cost and whatever the total cost is, but it ultimately ends up being a percentage, something shy of 70%. So right now, from last year, we're anticipating about $400,000 from the state to go to the town for excess costs.
It was just last year that Westbrook had 2 students who moved in that had out-of-district placements that they had to go back
Correct.
and request over $400,000 in additional money.
That's right.
But that goes to the town, that doesn't go back into Board of Ed budget, right? That goes into the town budget though. not-
So
That goes into the town budget.
yeah, the excess
not the Board of
cost
Ed budget.
is another revenue to the town. And towns do operate differently. Some towns have the Board of Ed budget to include that excess cost in their budget, so they actually reduce their overall budget by that amount based on a revenue. Ledyard, for example, 4 or 5 years ago had that was the case. They had anticipated $1 million+ from excess costs, and that percentage was considerably less. So, and I want to say it was actually, it may have been less than 500,000, and they were in a big bind because the town didn't have it and they didn't have it, and they had to come up with it. It was really ugly. So, I mean, we've been very, very fortunate in our community, both on the town side and on the Board of Ed side, that we do a pretty darn good job, even though there's this angst around increases. I mean, I not to be smacking of being arrogant, but 1.4% increase in our overall operation budget. Most of us realistically aren't going to be able to manage a 1.4% increase or smaller than 1.4% increase in our regular home budget. I mean, with just the normal expenditures that we, and we're multiplying that by pretty significant, just from a physical plant standpoint. I mean, even if you just try to equate it in that way. So,
Jack,
yes.
to that end, these numbers, how do we compare per student spending to our surrounding towns?
That's a great question, and I wish there was an easy answer. The state does do a cost comparison, and so on the website you can look at their budgets and the number of students, and from that point on it gets very complicated because our enrollment, I mean, just for one piece, our enrollment is our in-district kids, the kids that are in out-of-district placements that we actually count. So for next year, the 1853 are all kids that we are directly educating. But it also includes kids that are going to magnet schools, kids that are going to VOTEC schools, and I think that's it. That we are paying some cost to educate. Actually, VOAG programs, VOAG, VOTEC, and magnet schools. And so there's another number, there's a resident student number that is actually what you see on the website. So, and that causes some folks great consternation because it also leads to the magical MBR. But when you start to look at trying to compare budget to budget to budget, what we include and what other towns include in their operation budget, if you were just basing it on that, some other budgets include capital in their total budget, some do not. And so when you get to the state level, even though they try to parse it out as equitably or as similarly as possible, it still breaks down, and it's hard to make direct comparisons. We have fluctuated between $14,000 and $15,000 per student, and I haven't done an analysis at this point for this particular budget on that, although I did do some interesting calculations in terms of per student on an hourly basis what it costs, but I won't go into that. And it's cheap. Yeah. It's cheap. So that's unfortunately, I mean, the best thing that we can do that we have typically done is to look at total appropriated budgets for town by town, and and say, okay, it's going to be as equal as it is, and know that there are going to be some variations between that. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So, last year there was a surplus. Was the surplus across the board, say 1 or 2% from each cost center, or were there 1 or 2 cost centers that really stood out saying, wow, we had allocated a lot more in this cost center?
So so it wasn't, I mean, realistically, the individual cost centers, especially the school cost centers, maintenance, athletics, when you look at their budgets, they're pretty tight, and they essentially use the monies as are allocated. The main changes, or the things that create surplus, are in changes in personnel, and the fact that and it's a combination of changes in personnel and a better than anticipated claims rate in our insurance. So our health insurance costs have been far less than, even though we've held them flat over the last 3 years, than what we had anticipated. Some of that was some plan design changes that we put into place, and we reap better benefits. Some of it was education of staff. I mean, the plan design changes, and I know this is minutia, but it's important in the standpoint of changing the difference between going to a doctor, urgent care, and emergency room is significant in terms of what it costs the insurance company, or ultimately what it costs the board in terms of what it provides, and it changes the claims rate. So in educating and changing some of the co-pays for those to say, we don't want you to not go to emergency room if you have to go. If you break an arm, you're going to go to the emergency room. But you shouldn't be going to the emergency room if you want a culture done because you think you have bronchitis. You should go to your doctor. Or worst case scenario, you go to urgent care because that's a better differential than going to emergency room. So, and our staffs have bought into that. They actually get it. I mean, no one had ever really said that to them before, I guess. And so as we went through the negotiations for each of the bargaining units, those were examples that we tried to change. So we got better results than we even expected. we're also entering into a collaborative health group. We're doing we're doing dental, that was it, that would be a D, not N, dental and prescription through a collaborative. So we were before self-funded, but we're joined now with a larger pool, so it brings those costs into more control over the costs. And we're hoping that either this coming year or the following year, that we would move the whole health insurance, the medical portion of that insurance into the collaborative as well, to help bring down some, or to control costs. It's not going to necessarily reduce costs significantly. We're still gonna have a cost, and affordable health care is gonna have an impact, but it will help us contain those costs and control them so that they're not going all over the place. And so personnel and health insurance are the two major drivers for surplus over the last 3 or 4 years.
Because you know it's gonna come, right?
Yes. So one of the things that is also important in that discussion is that in this past year, when we started having this conversation about surplus, we were anticipating, doing an analysis, and we're going to be doing that analysis for this year. But doing that analysis last year, we were seeing and anticipating that we were going to be between $540,000 to $600,000 in anticipated surplus. So because that's part of the town charter that we're supposed to report that at the point of when we're presenting the budget, there was some discussion at that point to say, well, because you have that much anticipated surplus, we're gonna reduce capital by $103,000. We're gonna reduce your operating budget by $109,000 and change. And then, well, because you have surplus, take it out of your surplus to offset your 14-15 expenses. So by now, what's in your 14-15?
Who said that, the Board of Finance?
It started out with the Board of Selectmen. And so that was what we did. We reduced the capital by $103,000, right? 103. And we identified those, the technology, computers and upgrades and things that were already in the plan, and we purchased those at the end of last year out of 13-14 monies. We also addressed some operations monies out of the 109. Ultimately, the budget failed the first time, so they reduced our budget by another $110,000. So our budget from the original proposal to what was ultimately approved was reduced by $322,000.
322?
322 and change. 322,117. And we also looked at surplus at the end of the year and used the additional 110. So we absorbed 322,000 and change from surplus. And when we started to look at technology going forward and some of the security components that, although we had done a fairly significant job with that, there were some areas, some doors that needed cameras, there were some access entry points. There were a number of things that we identified during the course of the year that were not quite where we wanted it to be. So in the end, we ended up spending an additional little over $120,000. So a total of $420,000+ out of the 13-14 surplus on technology, security, curriculum and operations, and some unanticipated expenses like the sports officials, for example, was part of that. So I think what's critical, I guess the point of the conversation is that last year's surplus, while we did end up having a surplus, and we returned some monies to the town, and I can't tell you off the top how much right this second, but because I only need to know how much we actually spent. But we did end up spending a little over $400,000 total, but 320 of it was as a result of the direction of the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, based on their reductions to our proposed operating budget for this current year, 14-15. Make sense? Questions about that? I mean, that's, again, a little,
No, I just wonder how you argue or make the point that you were your surplus was, more than 1% lower than what you projected your budget at. And this year, you're proposing a 1+% increase. Someone would say, well, you had almost a 2% increase last year, and now you're saying you need even more this year. So how do you validate that need for that $900,000 more dollars than you didn't even spend, I don't know.
It's pretty easy to validate by just telling them, we never come back and ask for more money.
Right.
If you look at what the town spends as the town budget, and they put their budgets together, and then see how much is actually spent by the town for all those individual department budgets, they go back to the town collectively for well over $1 million.
And shift money, shift the chairs on the desk.
For well over
I
$1
need money
million?
here, here, and
Well
here.
over $1 million.
For well over $1 million. Everybody got that?
We never come back and ask
And we
for
don't,
more
and
money.
what we do is we
Knock on
return
wood.
money back to the town, and we put money back into capital expenditures that the town CEC pulls away from us. And they've got their own logics for it. I disagree with them. I think you need to put money into capital to maintain the facilities and to put the proper equipment that we need to do our job. So to have a surplus, as people want to call it, of 1% is exceptional. It's exceptional by anybody's standard, whether you're in educational or if you're in business. I mean, if you come up with a surplus like that, you're doing fantastic. You can control your costs.
Yep.
And it's-
Don't they say, what is the
Well,
number they
that's what
recommend?
I mean, that's what
They recommend like
That's the whole
9 or
point.
10% in surplus to have a healthy.
yeah, I think
Actually, the
the
town-
the
town
key
is
issue
around
is, and I think
7%.
to Sandy's question, is one that I struggle with every year, because it is a recurring one that we continue to try to work on a strategy to find that ultimate balance between having enough to cover all expenses that we've identified as specific needs for our district, to Phil's point, that we're not overextending to the point where we're saying, sky's the limit, but at the same time, meeting those critical needs, and every year we get trimmed in one spot or another. And the key areas that we're building this budget, in effect, 18 months in advance of actually using those monies. So while I can, for example, in personnel, I can look at my seniority lists, and I can say, I've got 10 people, and I don't have 10 people, but right now, if I were to say I had 5 or 6 people that were at 37.5 years or beyond, I can say, all right, I've got 5 people that I can anticipate are going to retire, because they're eligible to retire. And in the course of the last 5 years, that's 5 or 6 years that I've been here, those people are still here.
Right.
They're now at 42, 43, no, 41, 40, 39, 40, and 41. And some other people who are not eligible, we're not at 37.5 years, did ultimately retire for whatever reason, and, fine, that was all good. But we're not getting that information far enough in advance. Now, two factors there. One is that we don't really have a great incentive to have people give us that information up front. So we give them an extra day, extra professional leave day, extra day to take care of their business up at the state. And I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, obviously. If they tell us before December 15th. We also have not, that never happens. It hasn't happened yet since I've been here. And we actually moved the date. The other piece is that we haven't had to offer an early retirement incentive. And I'm proud of that, actually, because most of the early, there isn't one that I've seen yet that doesn't have longer-term residual costs to the community. So you have an initial, what appears to be an upfront savings, but it has a tail that you keep paying for. And so it doesn't have the residual savings that if someone just retires. Right now, if someone in the top 3 or 4 categories retires, and even with our master's step 3 kind of line that we use as an average, that on salary alone, we're roughly $25,000-$30,000 plus whatever the change that might be in insurance benefits from a family or 2-person to, in often cases, a single plan. So you get some additional residual savings. So both of those factors end up having an impact at the end of the school year. So we ultimately, by September, we've had 5 or 6 retirements or changes or whatever, and now we have that differential. Might be $150,000, might be $250,000 from a personnel standpoint. And then what's harder to calculate until you get to the because I can calculate that part pretty well. Once I know who's going to be on staff as of September 1, give or take, I can say, okay, so here's what I projected, and here's what I'm actually dealing with, $250,000. And again, there are some changes that happen during the course of the year. But the part that I can't calculate is the insurance changes, in terms of how that will actually impact our actual payments and claims. Because those 5 people change plans, that's an initial, I can calculate the difference in premium, but I can't calculate the difference in claims. Make sense? And so, how they're gonna use it, right? And so, I have and yet, every year, somebody changes jobs, or somebody that there's no way for me to figure. And, we look at trying to generate rumor mills as much as we can, how can we?
Do you offer any sort of insurance incentive buyout for them to say like, no, we don't want to take the insurance?
No, and again, unfortunately, we are positioned in such a way, particularly with our paraprofessional unit, which is probably where we might see some of that. But even with our teachers, where there's enough of a balance between people who are not taking insurance because a spouse has as good or better, or they work for different schools, whatever, that if we were to offer that, it would cost us money. And so we've done that analysis, not every year, but probably every 2 or 3 years, that, it's like, okay, that comes up. And again, with the early retirement piece, that comes up pretty much. It hasn't come up in the last 2 years, actually, but before that, it was routine, and they come up with a plan that they wanted me to look at, and it didn't work, from my opinion. So that's the so in the general, it's those 2 areas that are the primary. We've realized some savings in a couple of the other line items. Photocopying, 1 year was, almost 40,000.
Photocopying is my pet peeve.
So,
When you come on the start of the year and you have a stack of papers this thick, when you know
When you
it
have
could be
kids
done
in one
on
school, it's the same thing
But
too.
no, I just feel like it could be done
Oh,
online, and that
open the can
eliminates
of
the work
worms.
for the.
And you have to
for the
read
office.
Don't get Annalise started, don't get Annalise started.
Well, we've talked about it before.
Yeah, we have.
There's
But-
changes that need to be
Yeah,
made.
we're working on it, we're working on it.
They've been communicated.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah, we're working on it.
I get my newsletter.
I brought all of my paperwork that I had to fill out one night to the board table.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, I'm sorry, it's ridiculous, and it's especially ridiculous when 4 of them are all exact same information.
Are you looking at doing something that's online, software? So we won't.
I have requested that it be explored.
But you have
It's
to,
not
some
really-
of them you have to sign, so.
You can do a digital.
You can do it, yeah, you can do a DocuSign.
Yeah.
Technology committee, I think we just found some members in the community who would like to join the technology committee,
fabulous.
because that's an area for the technology committee. So, technology subcommittee.
Did you have it on your show? Will we take a picture?
Yeah, we'll take a picture.
Is this the
So-
total budget, the 1.48, or is it gonna be more than that, right?
That's only.
The operation is
That's only
1.48, but if you take in the capital and the debt service, it's 2.36 or 2.39.
2.39.
Okay, scandal has started.
I'm sorry?
Scandal has started.
Scandal has started.
Oh my God.
That is true. How to get away with murders on less than an hour, so we got to.
Right, priorities. Okay, need a floor up.